felt like a tremendous promise. However, when the lights darkened and the music stopped, they returned home exhausted, frequently in debt, and occasionally questioning whether it was all worthwhile it. Something really unjust was going on regarding it. These dancers lived up each and every episode. They weren't merely. They were the beating heart in the background. Viewers weren't only drawn to the show because of the vocalists. They watched to find out who would. What if you danced down the Soul Train line? Their movements and the clothes they would wear. They would dress up. These children were establishing national patterns. However, the show, they did not provide them with a fair share of the limelight. There, although the recognition was genuine, the passion was constrained. For many, watching television was sufficient initially, but eventually, the lack of assistance and compensation started to take them out. Then there were the portions that were manipulated. Perhaps you recall the Soul Train Scramble Board. An entertaining small dancer's task was to unjumble the names of well-known performers. It appeared impulsive and foolish, yet in accordance with a number of previous participants, it wasn't all that genuine. The board was frequently predetermined or carefully supervised to make. I'm positive nobody made a mistake on air. Manufacturers didn't want to deal with the stress of life errors, hence, they subtly influenced the match. At-home viewers had no notion. They believed it to be true. They cheered when a correct guess was made. However, actually, it wasn't always an even level playing field. Additionally, for competitors who didn't remove that camera assistance, it was annoying. They departed with a sense of while some were ashamed or deceived, others gave an advantage in a discreet manner. That kind trust is eroded by this. Episodes weren't shot once every 7 days. Rather, dancers were requested to record many episodes consecutively, frequently over extended weekends. This required arriving early, staying on stage, and dancing all day till the end of the night. All of this was completed with minimal food and no actual pauses, and no more compensation. Additionally, if you didn't bring enough clothes for several episodes, you can be left or sent home, out of important parts. The strain was steady. You needed to act, grin, and give it your all each and every minute, even when you were worn out. A few dancers have come forward to say they were hesitant to voice complaints. They sensed interchangeable. If you made too many requests or appeared overly worn out, there was always someone else is waiting to replace you. Many were silent because of that dread. Additionally, it maintained them trapped in a loop in which they were praised on television, but forgotten when the cameras ceased to record. Their difficult work influenced the culture of the country, but was frequently written off as merely a component of the performance. In retrospect, Soul Train brought so much happiness to the world. It swung opened doors for artists of color and established a room for fashion, independence, and expression. However, that doesn't imply it was flawless in every way. Behind the sparkle were genuine donors, all of their possessions, frequently, without being genuinely observed or encouraged. Their narratives are equally important as the songs and dances that we can still recall, since the truth is that if those dancers weren't there, there would not a Soul Train. Other than these gloomy, actually, there was one notorious scene. The makers made a concerted effort to hide armaments so startling that it was concealed from the public view. How come it wasn't shown? And what actually took place? You're going to discover, and believe me, you'll be startled. Among the most notorious and Soul Train's contentious moments, October 1980 was a historic month, with Rick James, which was really contentious that producers attempted to bury it deep. Well known for his captivating stage presence, and Rick James's rebellious demeanor had established a track record of pushing limits. As soon as he entered, the fans anticipated a Soul Train performance, a performance to remember. What they got, though, was something much more what anyone had expected. As soon as James began his performance, the enthusiasm was indisputable. He started his performance with the distinctively intense atmosphere that made He's a Star. He was in his element, consuming the energy of the crowd and putting all of his energy into the performance. However, as the song went on, James made a move that astounded the viewers as well as the people in front of the cameras. He started interacting directly with the audience, departing from the performance's standard format. Rick James, always the showman, unrestrained by outrageous dancing steps, entertaining the crowd and giving them the impression that they were a part of the encounter. He made a move toward the limits of what was deemed suitable for Soul Train. The program had always took delight in serving as a platform that honored black culture. Nevertheless, it additionally functioned with a considerable degree of civility and deference. James's actions, however, it appeared to contradict that benchmark. His exchanges weren't only audacious, but occasionally overtly provocative, establishing a situation that was far more daring than what Soul Train had previously broadcast. The untamed vitality and physique of his performance weren't merely a demonstration of musical prowess, but an assessment of the performance's boundaries. The audience was enthralled and captured up in all he did, but the time was quickly rising over what the Don Cornelius and the producers had intended for the program. It was uncooked, free, and possibly too much for the meticulously constructed image of Soul Train had put a lot of effort into building. As the show had always served as a free platform, black people's celebration and expressiveness. This time, culture was different. It pushed the limits of appropriate behavior in a manner that made them wonder just how far could the show go in its quest of genuineness. It wasn't merely a performance, it was a declaration. James was not planning to follow any regulations or standards. He was present to make his own declaration, one that was almost as wild and disobedient as his music. This scene, in its uncut anarchy, endures in the recollections of people who saw it. It was a striking departure from the typical Soul Train formula and a clear illustration of the dangers associated with live television. Despite the fact that the performance was crazy, and it was a moment that shook and was unforgettable. The basis for the program. For some, it became a representation of pushing boundaries. Others saw it as a warning about what may occur if such boundaries were too much testing. You must be considering what was the reaction of the producers. Let's simply say that they swiftly discovered they had a serious issue on their palms. However, what did they do for harm prevention? The response will be unexpected. The prompt reaction, as per came from nothing to those who were present, besides the visionary Don Cornelius behind Soul Train. He wasn't a bashful person, away from difficult choices. Additionally, when Rick James went too far in his Don was careful to intervene during the performance. Don reportedly interrupted the conversation with, "This ain't bandstand," he said sharply. The language was straightforward and uncompromising. A note to Rick James, as well as the group, that Soul Train was no ordinary musical performance. It had a distinct vision, a benchmark to maintain. Additionally, it was going to be honored. Here's the comment, wasn't only meant to stop James in his tracks. It involved sketching a distinct line in the sand, indicating Soul Train's purpose was to commemorate black culture that is dignified rather than chaotic or dispute. Following the event, the creators hurried to determine